Hey there, I'm Brian Johnson, and I am with deepm.ai, a precision rank optimization system. And so today I'm going to be talking about the title split that Amazon is bringing to us that could frankly split your sales. So I'll go through that and what that means to you. So if we look at what is the two-part title that Amazon is introducing. So right now we've got a title on our product detail page. It's about 200 characters long. And then what is actually seen by shoppers varies depending on what platform they're on. As an example on that, it's 80 characters if you're on a mobile device, right? But that can vary depending on which mobile device you're on. So it's always good to check to see how does your title, how does your images, how does all of your content of each product listing look on a variety of platforms and devices. So the split title or the two-part title is essentially where Amazon is going to take your 200 character title and they're going to identify what are the full keywords that fit into, or the most important words that fit into the first 55 characters, roughly 55 characters. And so they're not going to do the dot, dot, dot and split halfway into a word. They're generally going to use a full word, make it nice and clean, and they're going to break and they're going to have a subtitle right below that, smaller text, not quite as bright as color, maybe a little bit grayed out. And it's going to contain the next 75 characters. At which point, then they'll add in the dot, dot, dot. So as you can see on that, that brings you down to about, oh, what is that? 130 characters roughly total that you're going to see on search results. Now, once shoppers actually click through and get to your product detail page, they'll see the full 200 characters. And so if we look at it from an experience, we're going to look at it from two different viewpoints. One is what's the shopper's experience and what do they see? What does the algorithm see? What does A9 see? What does Cosmo, Rufus, what do they all see that is, from a data standpoint, what is going to be relevant to them? So, as an example on this, if we take a look at this Hydro Cup stainless steel tumbler, the 200 character standard detail page title you can see is a full title, right? You go into mobile and it cuts it down, it cuts it off right after the 20 ounce, cuts out the rest of the words obviously that are on the title until you click through to that listing. So if you've got anything that's really important, it's got to be within that first 80 characters. Now, Amazon is playing this game of let's do a split title. Let's show prominently about a 55 character title, and then we'll show an additional 75 characters as a subtitle. A little bit better than mobile, but we haven't seen the mobile version of what this split title is going to look like. We've only seen the desktop version. So there's going to be some things you want to prepare for. So, this is going to have an impact primarily on your user experience, and you need to pay close attention as to what experience does the customer have, does the shopper have, and are they seeing all the words that you need them to see in order to show that you've got relevance, you've got differentiation, especially differentiation from every other competitor that comes up in the search results? So let's go through here, and that's obviously going to affect things like your click-through rate, potentially your conversion rate, overall sales, and it may also affect your A9. In fact, we expect that it will affect the A9 ranking as well as any of the other AI tools as far as like Cosmo contribution to A9, Rufus contribution to A9 and using Cosmo. Ultimately, your core foundation of what you need to focus on is going to be satisfying what does A9 want from you. And so let's go through a couple of elements here, and then I'm going to show you some of the more technical uh, technical methods of optimizing a content field. So something I haven't taught before, I'm going to show you today. So the first part on this is going to be the core product title is what Amazon's going to show as that first 55 characters, full complete words, 55 characters. That is going to have the strongest signal, not only to the shopper, but also to the algorithm. The product highlights is going to be the next 75 characters. Now, that may open up some flexibility for Amazon to dynamically change product highlights and even core product title based on what it thinks that that shopper is most interested in, what their buying behavior in the past has been. That's kind of where Amazon had discussed back in 2014 at Amazon Accelerate that they would introduce dynamic titles. Now we'll see this year as far as whether or not that also occurred at the 2025 Amazon Accelerate. Now, uh, when we're talking about the words, I'm going to go into how to optimize your title. What are some of the science behind optimizing titles as far as SEO or search engine optimization? But keep in mind, from a general concept, is that every word in a title is going to be weighted or is a weighted ranking signal to A9 and Cosmo. And therefore, things like placement, sequence, position, all of those matter in each content field, starting with your title. And if we're talking about a two-part title, now we have to think about a new content piece, one that is short, 55 characters. The next one is mid, the next 75 characters after that. And so then we're going to have to pay attention to that. And I'll show you some examples here. And as always, we're not just looking at it from a data perspective. We're not looking at it just from an algorithmic perspective. Yes, we can send all the right signals to A9 in order to rank our product in number one position. We have the data to be able to determine how to do that and how to optimize that. But ultimately, we also want to maintain our click-through rates and our conversion rates. Those come from compelling titles that differentiate our product from our competitors. And so to the shoppers, you're going to have two lenses. One is going to be for the algorithm, the other one's going to be for the shopper. The shopper is primarily going to be looking for relevance and differentiation. And then A9 and Cosmo are going to be looking at how do the words and the text that is inside the core and the highlight content fields, how do those signal relevance, position, sequence, in other words, what your intent is as far as targeting that shopper. General practice, best practice is the narrower you focus in on your target audience through your content, the more likely that A9 and Cosmo are going to find that a relevance match and therefore show your product higher up in search results. There's over 100 different signals that you can send to A9, but the title, no question, is one of the most important content fields. And now Amazon wants you to consider two parts to that content field of the title. So you want to find that balance. Now, how do we do this? I'm going to get technical with you here because I'm going to give you a crash course here on title optimization or search engine optimization, SEO, and some of the elements I'm going to go through. Now, I don't have time to go through all of the technical aspects, but what I'm going to go through here really quick is going to be include presence, density, placement, proximity, sequence, and exchange. Presence is, if we look at that top row in the table, let's say, for instance, we're trying to target stainless steel tumbler, and a second term is going to be leak-proof tumbler. Maybe those are our top two hero search terms that we're trying to rank for. We're trying to demonstrate. Maybe leak-proof is our differentiator from competitors. We want to make sure that those are prominent and visible by the shopper and also picked up by the algorithm so that we can get ranked for those terms well. We want that visibility. We want that engagement from the shopper. So when it comes to presence, this is simply just a check of, do the words and phrases exist in this content field? Anywhere, right? 200 characters long. Does it exist? It's going to change here. I'll show you in a minute here how that's going to change a little bit. But presence can simply be for stainless steel tumbler. If we look at the first row in the table, we can see that right after the brand name, stainless steel tumbler, very prominent, right? It's definitely present. We can see that leak-proof is a word in a different part of the title. And since we're going after leak-proof tumbler, well, tumbler is already in the first part of the title. Leak-proof is in the middle of the title. Therefore, technically, it is present. Okay? It exists. Those words, those phrases, well, I should say one phrase and then another set of words exist in the title. That's presence. Density is going to be how many other words are you competing with? In other words, if you're going after stainless steel tumbler, if you were to strive, and I don't recommend it, but if you were to strive for 100% SEO optimized title when it comes to all of these things, as far as presence, density, placement, proximity, sequence, then the title would only be 3 words long, wouldn't it? It would be stainless steel tumbler. It'd be present. There would be no other words to compete with stainless steel tumbler. Because think about this. When it comes to density, it is the number of words that you include divided by the total number of words in the title or in the content field. Now, obviously, if you look at something like the bullet points or any of the description fields, that becomes a much smaller number when you're talking about if you're going after stainless steel tumbler, your density is far diluted in the bigger content fields. In a standard 200 character title, you may have, let's see here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Let's say there's double that. Let's say there's 26 words. I didn't count it, but let's say there's 26 words. 3 of those words, stainless steel tumbler, is what you're going after. So that's 3 divided by 26. If I do some really quick math on this, should have put this in, right? That's 11, 12% share of the title, of the 200 character title. The density, about 11 to 12%, is for your term stainless steel tumbler. So any other words, yes, you can go up to 200, but you don't have to go all the way up to 200. You don't even have to go to 100 if you don't want to. It really depends on how focused you are and how determined you are in order to rank and emphasize your focus on specific words and search terms. So everything else, every other word that is not part of your target search terms or what you're trying to push, that could be your brand name, it could be the individual words or phrases of the search terms that shoppers are using, it could be the single differentiator. The fact that maybe your product is the only one that's vacuum insulated. Okay, you'd want to keep those. Everything else technically expendable, right? And will give you a better lift when it comes to A9 ranking because you have a higher density on a focused set of terms. However, going after density may pull away from showing the shopper the full title, that they may see something that they were intentionally searching for. Maybe it wasn't in the search terms they used, but it was something that maybe they were looking for. Maybe they were looking for a 20 ounce but they didn't search for 20 ounce, right? Maybe they were looking for a rubber base, right? And they didn't use those terminology. The next one, placement. So third row in the table, placement. This has to do with where are the words positioned within that content field. So in a 200 character title, if you have stainless steel, the best position for stainless steel tumbler, if you're focused on placement optimization, is going to be in the front, ahead of any other word, including, in this case, the brand name. If it's all the way in the back, let's say it's after the color clover in this example, and it says clover stainless steel tumbler, then yes, you do get credit for relevance because it's in the title, which is heavily weighted for A9, but not near as much as if you had stainless steel tumbler in the front or in the middle. Okay, so placement is where do you have that position? Where is it positioned? As you can see in our example here, if we're going after leak-proof tumbler, tumbler is toward the front of the title, but leak-proof is in the middle. Therefore, they're not going to be weighted the same. Subtle change, right? Is there a mathematical formula to determine that? Yes. Do we know it? No. That's an internal algorithm that does constantly change. A9 doesn't change that much, but sometimes there are little calculations like, well, this one's 0.9 multiple, and this other one's 1.1, times multiple. That kind of stuff does change. Proximity. Proximity is the distance between related words. If I'm going for, in this case, stainless steel tumbler, there's no gaps between stainless and steel and tumbler, right? There's a gap between stainless and tumbler, but if my phrase that I'm going after is stainless steel tumbler, it's all together, right? But If you look at the second phrase we're going after, a leak-proof tumbler, not only, there's a sequence problem here, which I'll address next, but the distance, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words between tumbler and leak-proof, right? So that proximity, there's a break in that proximity where instead of being right next to each other, there's a gap between those, right? That's what we call proximity optimization. So if you're really trying to go for leak-proof tumbler, you'd have them together, and according to the next row on this, you'd have them in sequence. First order, second order, third order type of thing, right? Where it's a string or a phrase. So sequence is going to be, are they in a single phrase that is readable, right? It's not leak-proof water bottle, it's leak-proof tumbler, right? The problem is when you start overlapping, when you have clusters of search terms. Clusters are related search terms that overlap with each other. That in general is a pretty good practice when it comes to optimizing content fields, is to, instead of repeating phrases or having disjointed words, you try to blend them in naturally. You want them to be naturally read by a human because that is your shopper. Currently, at least until the agents start doing the shopping. So the example on that, if you look at something like sequence, in fact, if you look at something like placement, for instance, where you need to try to optimize for where in the content field those words are, you may want to try to bring leak proof up front. That would mean in this case, you'd be breaking the leak proof water bottle unless you decide to duplicate that word. Not always recommended. That's what we'll talk about that when it comes to exchange. When it comes to proximity, bringing leak proof forward toward closer to stainless steel tumbler would also improve your proximity score. And then sequence, if you bring leak proof ahead of tumbler in the title, in this case, it would be ahead of stainless steel tumbler, then it's not going to be leak proof tumbler, but leak proof is going to come before tumbler. And therefore, you're going to get your sequence score, right? Your sequence score is going to improve if you're trying to optimize for that. So if you look, for instance, as an example, under the placement, the third row placement, if you look on all the way on the right-hand column there, you can see maybe a suggested of meshing these terms together, these different clusters, a cluster of different search terms, you're trying to blend them together, maybe something to split test. Always split test your title. And I recommend you split test your titles throughout the year. Run 4-week A/B split tests and do it again every 4 weeks, constantly trying to optimize for things like conversion rate and clicks and purchases. But in that third row for placement, you can see in the right column, maybe the suggestion is leak-proof stainless steel tumbler. Now, you put leak-proof up front, maybe after the brand name. Now you've pushed stainless steel tumbler back a little bit when it comes to the placement. But you've now improved not only the proximity, but the sequence for both terms, right? So there's a little give and take when it comes to SEO. That's why it's a lot more art than science. And it does require quite a bit of split testing over time to see where it truly matters. My recommendation is that anytime you are optimizing a content field, you're always focused in, you're always fully aware of which search terms sell the most products, right? Which search terms have the highest relative conversion rate to your competitive set. And certainly, ones that are relevant that obviously are not misleading or not brand names, right? Exchange is an interesting one. Exchange, and we call that, this is kind of a short version of what we call a semantic exchange. Exchange is simply just replacing a word with a synonym, right? It's a semantic equivalent or a semantic exchange word. And the way that I would do this, I put a little pro tip there on the right-hand side in bright blue. If I'm going to use a language model, I'll put my title in and say, okay, for each word and phrase within this title, list popular is important, semantic equivalents. That's the same thing as saying synonyms, but it's just more the technical term for it. And then I'd put in my full title, and it'll come back and it'll give you a bunch of different words and phrases that could be alternatives. Now, if it can't find any alternatives, like for instance, when I did it, I came back and said, okay, with straw, and it gave me a bunch of examples where straw was involved. It didn't have any popular equivalents or synonyms for the word straw. Do they exist? Yes. Are they considered popular by the language model? No, apparently not, because all it did is it gave me different variations of the word straw. That kind of tells you it's like, okay, straw seems to be like the one that I'm going to use on this one. Here's why this makes a difference is that if there's for some reason, because a common question when it comes to things like density is, if I'm trying to beat out my competitors for the term tumbler, then can I put tumbler 3 times in that content? Can I put it 3 times I can say, okay, hydro jug sport, stainless steel tumbler with straw, vacuum insulated tumbler, 20 ounce leak proof water bottle tumbler, right? Well, since January of 2025, no, you cannot. You can only use the same word twice. There are some hacks that you can get around with that, singular versus plural, it'll let you do it. But I'd recommend instead is one of the common practices that is being taught in order to appease Cosmo is to use semantic equivalent or exchange words that maybe are a little bit more emotive. Maybe you adjust that, your language model, your chat GPT prompt in order to say, okay, for each word and phrase within this title, list popular and emotive semantic equivalents. Because then you're kind of leaning into both. Well, how do I influence Cosmo as well as A9, as well as just kind of give a little bit of variety so I'm not repeating words? And so I might have something like, for something like Tumblr, an emotive word is not going to come up probably. But for a noun, you might have tumbler, you might have cup, you might have drinkware. Those are some alternatives instead of trying to repeat the same word multiple times. But things like A9 will understand it's like, well, those are basically the same word, and it's going to give you credit. It's going to give you kind of some rank juice, some credit for density, even though you used 3 different words to describe the exact same thing. So it's kind of a way of gaming the system without polluting your title and your content with the same word repeated multiple times. You're tricking the algorithm to say, well, that's basically the same thing. So I'm going to just give you the same score as if you put in Tumblr 3 times or 10 times or 100 times. Don't do that. But I'm just saying it's a way of gaining a little bit extra juice. And all you're trying to do, you're not trying to be perfect with your content optimization. You're just trying to beat your competitors. You're just trying to beat the neighbors, right? Um, and so some of these can be, things like, Tumblr, the exchange might be cup. Um, Leak proof might be spill proof. Now you might get into that might be generate a little bit more emotive language because you're talking about, um, I was never an English major, so that's what probably an adverb, right? Could be an adjective, could be an adverb, right? Adverb maybe is leak proof, spill proof. Maybe there's something that's like, non-messy, something that to a human reader, if the language models consider it to be a synonym or a semantic equivalent word, A9 will probably see it that way also and give you credit for density and repeating the same word. To a human, though, if maybe spill proof says like, oh man, I spill mine all the time. Maybe that has more value to me than leak proof, right? Maybe I'm clumsy and I knock things over all the time. I want something that is spill proof because I'm going to knock it over. Somebody else who says like, you know what, I put it on the seat of my car and it's turned on its side and it leaks all over my car. To that person, leak proof probably makes more sense, right? But spill proof will also work. So you're kind of injecting some emotive language, even though you're trying to convince the A9 that and Cosmo at the same time as you're trying to give some visualizations to your shopper to stand out. All right. So let's kind of go through this. Now, why does this make a difference when it comes to the split title? Now that we kind of had that crash course on on title optimization and some of the techniques that are there is think about your full title. You're not at risk because everything that's in your 200 character title is going to be considered. Now, it is going to be more considered toward the front of the title or the content field. That includes bullet points, A plus, the hidden description fields, back end, whatever. It's going to be considered higher on the front than it is on the back because that signals more things like intent by you as the seller that you're trying to focus in on a specific audience, right? But they may change the way they score this when it comes to things like, okay, what is visible versus what's in the content field? If what's visible on a mobile app, the mobile Amazon app, is 80 characters, then maybe everything after 80 characters is actually cut off. And so if you are trying to separate yourself from your competition by saying like, look, I've got a leak proof stainless steel tumbler and I'm one of only just a few that actually have that. If you had your title set up this way on mobile, they don't see leak proof. So they skim right past you onto the next one. It gets even worse if you get down into this split title because then it takes even more away. Now, vacuum insulated, maybe I don't care about, but what if 20 ounce is something I was specifically looking for? And I don't see 20 ounce in the prominent 55 character title. Now, it may show up, of course, in that subtitle when they do the two-part titles, and they'll see it. But what do you think is going to stand out to a shopper more? That bold title right up front, that's 55 characters, or on mobile, maybe it's 80 characters. Don't make them work, right? You want to, whatever is your compelling differentiation that's going to make your product stand out, make sure that you're looking at 55 characters, 80 characters, and then the 200 characters to make sure that all of those are synced together. So I hope that helps. I hope it gives you a chance to go through and to optimize those. I know somebody was probably going to ask, "Hey, can I get a can I get a screenshot of that crash course title?" Then there you go. I'm Brian Johnson. I'm with Deep M, and I wish you a great day.